Back in the late 1980s, when I first drafted the lecture that would eventually become my essay, Self-Censorship in Public Discourse, a Theory of Political Correctness and Related Phenomena, it seemed to me that debates about political correctness were only the latest iteration of an ancient dilemma, which is this: to speak in public about fraught political issues can be a risky business. What one ought to say, who one ought to say it to, how one ought to say it, or whether one ought to say anything at all, these have been understood to be pivotal philosophical problems since the time of Plato's Apology. The debate is certainly even older than that. This was the problem I wanted to address. One could, I thought, substitute the modern public sphere, the university campus, the television talk show, the newspaper op-ed page, and so on, for the agora of ancient Athens without altering the basic contours of this problem. I was teaching at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government at the time. My impetus for the essay, in the first instance, was the emergence on college campuses of the formal and tacit speech codes that came to be called political correctness. However, my inspiration was not limited to domestic affairs. Upheavals in the former Soviet Union and East Germany, in Czechoslovakia, and in other states that were freeing themselves from repressive and dysfunctional communist governments provided a global context for my ruminations. I read stories of neighbors turning in neighbors to the authorities for thought crimes. I saw reports of widespread silence among people of conscience in the face of gross public injustices. All of these led me to wonder how those governments had managed not merely to enforce regimes of legal censorship, but to induce regimens of tacit self-censorship that stifled the critical discourse of entire populations. Citizens in those nations had good reason to fear the state's reprisal, of course. After all, unemployment, imprisonment, and torture weren't unheard of. But I came to think that the problem of self-censorship is much more subtle than that, entailing as it does not only the iron fist of state repression, but also the velvet glove of social cooptation. It seemed to me that it was not just fear of government action that kept people quiet. Rather, what lay at the root of things was the inescapability of drawing an inference ad hominem against the person. This, I came to think, was true both abroad in the communist nations and, more subtly, at home in the United States, where an individual's right to self-expression without state interference is supposed to be guaranteed by the Constitution.